Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, but also, as you'll see, at the end of this video. In answering these questions by video, it is my fond hope that the answer is made useful not only to the person who has asked the question, but also anyone else out there who may be wondering the same thing. Now, I suspect many of you are wondering this particular same thing, because today's Question of Doom is actually in response to an increasingly frequently asked question. So as the year progresses, more and more I'm being asked to explain the 2012 phenomenon. And I suppose, quite rightly, you're wondering whether or not it's based in history or archaeology. Is there actually something to worry about? Now, if you don't know quite what the 2012 phenomenon is, don't worry, it shall sort of be explained during this video, but it's worthwhile mentioning that I'm not a Mayanist. I'm not a Mayan or even a Mesoamerican expert per se. I know a little bit about the archaeology of that part of the world, but I didn't really focus on it in my studies. So I have had to make some extensive notes here from some books and also from the internet, but crucially they are well researched, so worry not. Let's see where this goes. So first of all, the 2012 phenomenon actually it hangs around a particular date this year, and that's the 21st of December 2012. So at the end of the year, apparently something is going to happen, something big. But what exactly is going to happen depends on who you talk to. Ideas range from a spiritual change, a new spiritual era for humanity, all the way to a physical change. Somehow, physically, human beings will be altered come the 21st of December. Other notions surround, or rather hang upon, the idea of cosmic alignments bringing about changes on the planet, a solar maximum, i.e. our own sun, frying the Earth with extreme radiation and other magnetic kind of things. Also, a collision, a planetary collision may well occur, apparently, on this date. Planet X, so-called, may well hit Earth on the 21st of December. And also, a black hole may well suck up, well, all of us on that date. So depending on who you talk to, something's going to happen, but it ranges from a fairly positive spiritual shift where a new era begins, all the way through to a black hole coming along with us and sucking us out of existence. So, or possibly into a new existence, depends on, I suppose, where you stand on those things. Anyway, yes, it's meant to be a significant date and something will happen. But none of these ideas are really accepted by mainstream scholars. The archaeologists, historians who know a bit about the period don't really think that much is going to happen at all. Now, all of this really comes from a tradition of so-called ages. The Mayans in particular believed that there had been 3 worlds prior to our own. These worlds essentially had been failed worlds. And our world was the 4th world. It was a success and human beings were placed upon it, which is a good thing. Now, what's interesting though is that while there is this tradition of world ages, what it means when we get to a certain point on a calendar is not fully really explained. Essentially, Mesoamerican writings, or rather more to the point Mayan writings, weren't usually prophetic. They tended to be either talking about current events, or, in the case of calendars, just projecting forward with certain festivals, that kind of thing. We'll come back to that in a moment though. Now, why is all this important? Well, the 3rd world, the world before our own, ended after 13 Baktons. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but I'll continue just for the sake of ease. Now, a Bakton is a period of time which is 144,000 days, or 394 years long. Now, 13 Baktons equates to 5,122, or, if you want to round it up, 5,125 years. And after this period of time, supposedly the 3rd world ended. Now, just because the 3rd world ended after 5,000 and a bit years doesn't mean that this world is meant to end at that point, but nonetheless, this gets some folk very excited. Now this so-called long count calendar isn't actually a Mayan invention. It was actually apparently inherited from the Olmec traditions. But nonetheless, it's a very useful way, or indeed continue to be a very useful way, of people marking out time. And that's what it seems that these calendars were doing. There's no meaning necessarily associated with the end of the 13th Bakhtun in Mayan traditions. There are lots of writings referring actually to dates beyond it, and indeed, well, we'll come back to the future in a second. Now, where did the confusion arise? Well, in 1957, a Mayanist and astronomer, apparently called Maud Worcester Mixmon, wrote that the completion of the Great Period of 13 Bakhtuns, i.e. the period of time after which the Third World ended, would have been of the utmost significance to the Maya. These assertions were sort of echoed in later writings. In 1966, Michael Coe wrote that there is a suggestion that Armageddon will overtake the degenerate peoples of the world and all creation on the final day of the 13th Bakhtun. Thus our present universe will be annihilated in December 2012. And unfortunately these assertions were repeated for quite a few years, all the way up to the early 90s. However, there was nothing written down by the Mayans or in any other relevant scripts or records that point to the end of the 13th Bakhtun in the Fourth World being the end of something, or even being a massive change. If anything, it's likely that the Mayans would have gone, yes, we outlasted the Third World, we're clearly doing better. Now, they even looked to the future. Now, recently, a calendar was unearthed, found at Zultun. Again, maybe we're pronouncing that incorrectly. Xultun. And this particular calendar actually looks forward into the future 7,000 years. That's a long way. That's definitely more than a whole Bakhtun. And, or rather, a whole 13 Bakhtuns, rather. And therefore, the Mayans weren't looking for an end point. They weren't looking for the end of the world. What they were actually looking for, to quote the archaeologist, or one of the archaeologists involved, the Maya were looking for a guarantee that nothing would change. It's an entirely different mindset. We look for endings, says the archaeologist. Now, this is quite possibly a relic or a cultural echo, I suppose, of being in a Western society. Like it or not, ideas, for example, from Christianity affect much of our society, and therefore often we look for the Armageddon, the end of all things. But also, so did previous religious beliefs or cultures. For example, the Norse people very much believed in the Ragnarok, the end of the world, and they definitely had beliefs about that. So maybe it's a Northern European thing, or rather a broader Western idea, just to look for the end, whereas the Mayans really weren't looking for the end. Some archaeologists go so far as to say that they did not conceive this to be the end of creation, as many have suggested, and indeed the 2012 phenomenon is a complete fabrication, a chance for a lot of people to cash in. Now, it's worthwhile pausing for a second, and incidentally, actually, I'll put a link to the news story about the Zultun calendar in the information below. It's worthwhile pausing and just thinking, why would archaeologists hide this? If we knew that the world was going to end, or that something drastic was going to happen spiritually or physically or whatever, why wouldn't we tell you guys? We mention all sorts of other things. We're quite open about various finds from around the world, or indeed when we can't find evidence of something, why would we go to extremes to try and hide this apparent truth? And actually, it's also worthwhile considering for a moment that we're not the first people to think, oh no, the Mayans, something to do with the Mayans may mean the end of the world. Columbus himself, in fact, was convinced that having had contact with these most distant of lands, that this would spell the end of the world. Some were saying that in 1524 a great flood would engulf the world simply because he had come into contact with those guys. So we, again, it seems to be a curious trait of certain groups of humanity to look for this big ending, when there isn't necessarily going to be one. And it doesn't look as though the Mayans believed there was. After all, they were making plans 7,000 years from now into the future. Quite impressive. Now, as far as cashing in, all this kind of thing goes, yes, there are lots of people out there with certain New Age beliefs who are looking for rebirth and this kind of idea. at the end of the year, and that's an admirable pursuit. But unfortunately, it's distracting from so many big issues, not only in science, such as potential climate change, environments being lost, or indeed the historical environment being threatened. It's also actually, when you look specifically at, for example, Mexico, it's threatening monuments. Recently there have been protests, and I'll put a link to the news story for this as well below, in Mexico, where anthropologists are staging sit-ins because they're so sick and tired of people turning up at these internationally significant monuments and essentially abusing them for their own modern, bizarre interpretations of something which isn't necessarily all that significant. So these guys are actually, or rather were, they may well still be, sitting in at the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico, and anyone who visits the museum gets accosted and they go, no 2012 stuff, and they get told really, real and really interesting facts, quandaries, and puzzles even, which are the real things to be considering and to be wondering about with regards to Mesoamerican culture. To a certain extent, the 2012 phenomenon is a bit of a distraction, and arguably we're constantly looking for these phenomena. In the 1500s, 1524 was the big date, apparently, at that moment. More recently, the Y2K virus, do you all remember that? The year 2000, apparently everything was going to just shut down and we'd all be transported back to the Stone Age. I love it when newspapers say that. But also, and obviously now, 2012. There's even been a film made called 2012, telling of a giant shift and the planet being ripped apart. So it just seems to be something innate, especially in Western culture. And it's no doubt going to be saturating the media all year, right up until the end of the year. But it seems, and hopefully this will help to put your minds to rest, that the Mayans themselves had no such concept of an end of times happening this year. Indeed, as I say, they were making plans. They were looking at 7,000 years ahead, which frankly is more than we do today, I think. And also as well, as I say, who's to say that they wouldn't have been celebrating? Frankly, this December would mean that they've outlasted the Third World. That's a reason to celebrate. We're better than that last failed world. Yeah. So there you go. Thank you to everyone who's asked questions about the 2012 phenomenon. It is a big deal. People are very bothered about it, and it can be a little bit confusing. Indeed, I didn't know precisely what it was all about when I first started looking into it. But hopefully this has helped to put some of those queries to rest. It is based upon a real count of time. It is based upon a real calendrical device, if you will, rather. But it's not an end of things. It is simply it's an anniversary, for want of a better word. So whether or not they would have celebrated it, we can't be entirely certain, but we can be sure that hopefully nothing horrible will happen. Of course, I'm touching all sorts of wood now, because if we get hit by a meteorite, of course you'll be banging on my door going, you lied to us, you told us nothing would happen. But okay, don't hold me to account if we do get hit by a meteor. Anyway, thanks for asking the questions, and until next time, bye bye.